Manipulators aren't afraid of strong people. They're afraid of people they cannot emotionally move. Because manipulation is not a physical game. It is an emotional one. Manipulators don't overpower you with logic, strength, or intelligence. They overpower you with emotional reactions, guilt, pressure, sympathy, confusion, fear, and urgency. If they cannot move your emotions, they cannot move you. And if they cannot move you, they cannot control you. That is why emotionally cold people, the ones who stay calm under pressure, the ones who don't flinch at provocation, the ones who don't drown in guilt or fear, are the manipulator's worst nightmare. These people break the entire psychological foundation manipulation relies on. Manipulators depend on your emotions to work for them. Your fear becomes their leverage. Your guilt becomes their weapon. Your uncertainty becomes their advantage. Your empathy becomes their doorway. Manipulation fails the moment the target stops responding emotionally. This is why manipulators rarely go after emotionally cold people, because coldness removes the fuel they need to operate. When your emotions do not bend, their strategy collapses. Their power isn't in their tactics. Their power is in your reactions. Take away the reaction, and the tactic dies. This is the side of emotional coldness society never teaches. That being hard to move makes you hard to use. And this is exactly why manipulators fear you, avoid you, or quietly resent you when emotional tactics fail. But before we go deeper, you need to understand something about yourself. Emotional coldness is not cruelty. It is control. It is the difference between reacting impulsively and responding intelligently. It is the difference between being emotionally played and being psychologically aware. You're not here to become cold-hearted. You're here to become cold-minded, calm, disciplined, unshakable. If you're ready to become the kind of person manipulators cannot read, cannot influence, and cannot break, then say this silently in your mind. I choose control over reaction. Because once you understand the psychology behind emotional coldness, you will never fear manipulators again. Let the signs begin. But before we proceed, tap like and hit subscribe. Because what comes next reveals why manipulators lose their power the moment you stop reacting, and how emotional stillness becomes the weapon they never know how to fight. Sign 1. Cold people don't react to emotional hooks. Manipulators survive on your reactions. They throw out emotional bait and wait for you to bite. They use guilt to make you submit, anger to make you defensive, sadness to make you soften, silence to make you chase, pressure to make you panic, and flattery to make you open up. Every manipulative tactic begins with a hook, something designed to provoke you emotionally and pull you into their frame. But emotionally cold people, they don't bite. They don't rush to explain themselves. They don't collapse under guilt. They don't respond to pressure. They don't get flattered into compliance. They don't reward emotional traps with emotional reactions. They pause. They observe. They evaluate. They stay unmoved. And this is what terrifies manipulators. Because when the hook fails, the entire psychological trap fails. Manipulators depend on rhythm, predictable emotional patterns, and automatic reactions. A person who doesn't react breaks the cycle instantly. Manipulators don't know what to do with someone who doesn't play along. Your emotional stillness becomes their frustration. Your restraint becomes their defeat. Sign 2. Cold people create psychological uncertainty. Manipulators thrive when they can predict you. They study your triggers, guilt points, fears, insecurities, patterns, and emotional weak spots. They need structure, a map of your reactions, to guide their tactics. But emotionally cold people don't give them that map. They don't reveal their buttons. They don't show their insecurities. They don't expose their emotional patterns. Their calmness creates uncertainty. Their silence becomes unpredictable. Their lack of emotional expression becomes unreadable. Manipulators fear nothing more than uncertainty, because uncertainty is the death of strategy. If they don't know what provokes you, they cannot provoke you. If they don't know what you fear, they cannot weaponize it. If they don't know what you need, they cannot withhold it. If they don't know what you want, they cannot manipulate it. If they don't know how you feel, they cannot twist it. Your emotional coldness forces them into blindness. They can't gather information. They can't identify leverage. They can't adjust their tactics. They can't gain psychological ground. The colder you are emotionally, the more confused they become, and the more power shifts in your direction. Say this affirmation: my unpredictability protects me. Manipulators don't operate through logic. They operate through emotion. They need you to feel obligated. They need you to feel guilty. They need you to feel responsible for their feelings. They need you to feel afraid of losing them. They need you to feel pressured into acting quickly. Manipulation only works when you emotionally cooperate, and emotionally cold people refuse to cooperate. This is why manipulators avoid them, resent them, or quietly fear them. When someone is emotionally detached, the manipulator can't link into their mind. They can't connect to their vulnerabilities. They can't influence their decisions. They can't steer their reactions. Instead of being pulled into drama, the emotionally cold person steps back. Instead of becoming overwhelmed, they become analytical. Instead of feeling trapped, they see the escape clearly. Manipulators need chaos to control you. Cold people deny them the chaos. Let's go deeper. Sign 3. Cold people don't reward manipulative behavior. Manipulators survive on reinforcement. If guilt works, they use more guilt. If pity works, they exaggerate suffering. If anger works, they escalate. If silence makes you panic, they withhold attention. Every tactic strengthens when it succeeds once, because success tells them to repeat it forever. But emotionally cold people do not reward manipulation. They don't give attention to tantrums. They don't soften under guilt. They don't sacrifice their needs to avoid conflict. They don't respond to emotional games with emotional reactions. They answer with neutrality, which starves the manipulation before it grows. The manipulator tries guilt, and you stay calm. They try pressure, and you don't move. They try emotional collapse, and you don't bend. They create urgency, and you slow down. Cold people break manipulative cycles by refusing to feed them. Without reinforcement, the manipulator's tactics become useless. Manipulators hate this because without emotional payoff, their strategies feel embarrassing. They're used to dominating emotional environments until they meet someone who gives them nothing to work with. Neutrality exposes their dependence on drama. Sign 4. Cold people can walk away without hesitation. A manipulator's greatest weapon is your fear of losing them. Fear of conflict, disapproval, distance, or appearing cruel. They depend on your emotional attachment to keep you trapped. But emotionally cold people don't have that fear. They can walk away from any relationship or situation without emotional collapse. They don't cling. They don't beg. They don't negotiate with disrespect. They don't rely on approval. They don't feel threatened by distance. When a manipulator realizes you are willing to walk away, they lose all leverage instantly. Their strategy falls apart because the root of manipulation is the belief that you need them. Cold people walk away because they value self-respect over connection. They walk away because peace is more important than validation. They walk away because dignity outweighs approval. And when the manipulator sees they cannot trap you through fear, their influence collapses. You cannot manipulate someone who is willing to lose you. Say this affirmation: I walk away when respect ends. Why? Detachment is the manipulator's worst nightmare. Emotional detachment is not numbness or cruelty. It is emotional independence, the ability to feel without being controlled. It means your emotions remain yours, not tools for someone else's agenda. Manipulators fear emotionally detached people because detachment removes every psychological entry point they rely on. They cannot provoke reactions, they cannot predict responses, they cannot manufacture guilt, they cannot push urgency, they cannot hijack empathy, they cannot weaponize fear, they cannot destabilize stability. Detachment turns emotional manipulation into meaningless noise because nothing penetrates the surface. An emotionally detached person is like a locked door with no handle. Manipulators push, pull, twist, and knock, but nothing opens. They become anxious, confused, and frustrated because their tactics require emotional access, and cold people grant them none. Detachment becomes psychological armor. Now say this silently: my emotions belong to me. I do not react to pressure. I do not feed manipulation. I do not fear walking away. My neutrality protects my peace. Manipulators don't fear strength, intelligence, or confidence. They fear unpredictability because manipulation requires patterns. They need to know your pressure points, fears, desires, and reflexes. Emotionally cold people remove every pattern. Their reactions are slow. Their emotions are quiet. Their decisions are measured. Their silence is unreadable. There is no rhythm to exploit, no emotional swing to hook into, no weakness to press. The manipulator is left blind, and psychological blindness terrifies them. Emotional coldness feels dangerous to a manipulative mind because their entire toolkit becomes useless. Sign 5. Cold people stay calm under pressure. Manipulators apply pressure expecting you to react immediately. Urgency, guilt, anger, silence, or emotional force, all designed to push you into impulsive compliance. They thrive when you panic, defend yourself, or lose control because emotional chaos is their playground. But emotionally cold people stay calm. They breathe slowly. They respond later. They separate emotion from logic. They control their tone. They maintain steady posture. They protect their internal balance. This calmness ruins a manipulator's momentum because it removes the emotional leverage needed for control. Calmness exposes the manipulator's tactic. Calmness destabilizes their confidence. Calmness makes them feel powerless. When you remain calm, the manipulator begins to panic in your place. If these insights shift how you see emotional control, tap like and hit subscribe. Your support helps this message reach others, ready to reclaim their power. Sign 6. Cold people force manipulators to reveal their true intent. When a manipulator cannot provoke you, they get desperate. Desperation destroys subtlety, and without subtlety, masks fall off. Their real motives begin spilling out. The entitlement behind their demands, the lies behind their kindness, the aggression behind their concern. Manipulators rely on gradual influence, small nudges, quiet guilt, subtle pressure. But when cold people don't react, manipulators speed up the process. And when they rush, they expose themselves fully. Cold people don't trap manipulators with aggression. They trap them with non-cooperation. Their emotional stillness acts like a psychological mirror, forcing the manipulator to reveal the insecurity, fear, and hidden agenda behind the tactic. Manipulators reveal themselves when they realize they cannot move you. Why calmness destabilizes emotional predators. Manipulators expect chaos because chaos makes people malleable. But cold people deny them the chaos. They don't match emotional volume. They don't escalate conflict. They don't engage in tug-of-war. They refuse to feed the fire. This creates an emotional vacuum, and manipulators cannot operate in a vacuum. They become confused, irritated, insecure, exposed, and finally powerless. Your calmness becomes their instability. Your silence becomes their discomfort. Your lack of reaction becomes their loss of control. Cold people don't create chaos by fighting. They create chaos by refusing to participate. This terrifies emotional predators because there is nothing to manipulate when you refuse to engage. From this point onward, you stop being predictable. You stop being emotionally available to manipulation. You stop being reactive. You stop being readable. You stop being easy to influence. You become calm in storms, unmoved by pressure, unshaken by emotional tactics, and unaffected by guilt, anger, or urgency. You become the person manipulators cannot use, the person they avoid, respect, or quietly resent. You become psychologically superior. Emotional coldness isn't loud or aggressive. It isn't confrontational. It is quiet hierarchy, a hierarchy manipulators feel instantly, even if they cannot explain why. When you are emotionally cold, emotionally controlled, and emotionally unavailable to manipulation, something shifts beneath the surface. Manipulators sense they are beneath you, not because you say more, but because you react less. Not because you dominate verbally, but because you cannot be emotionally dominated. Manipulators are used to controlling emotional environments, but around emotionally cold people, they become the unstable ones. They become reactive. They become confused. They become insecure. They become small. This is psychological dominance without raising your voice, and it terrifies emotional predators. Sign 7. Cold people make manipulators feel powerless. Manipulation only works when the manipulator feels superior, more adaptable, emotionally skilled, or strategically positioned. They rely on this superiority to maintain control. But emotionally cold people flip that hierarchy instantly by withdrawing emotional cooperation. When manipulators encounter someone cold, their guilt tactics fail. Their anger doesn't provoke. Their silence doesn't intimidate. Their flattery earns nothing. Their pressure gains no response. Their emotional collapse falls flat. Every strategy lands with no effect, leaving them powerless. A powerless manipulator becomes insecure. An insecure manipulator becomes exposed. An exposed manipulator becomes ineffective. An ineffective manipulator becomes insignificant. And nothing enrages a manipulator more than feeling insignificant. Your coldness makes their influence useless. And when influence dies, manipulation dies. Say this affirmation: my emotional stillness takes away their power. Sign 8. Cold people cannot be guilt-tripped or emotionally rushed. Guilt and urgency are the manipulator's strongest weapons. Guilt makes you doubt yourself. Urgency makes you act without thinking. But emotionally cold people break both tools instantly. Cold people cannot be guilt-tripped. They do not internalize responsibility that isn't theirs. They do not collapse when accused of being selfish. They do not soften because someone pretends to be hurt. They do not panic when told they're uncaring. They hear the words without absorbing the pressure. The manipulator says, "You're hurting me." The cold person replies, "I hear you," calmly, without collapsing. The manipulator says, "If you cared, you would do this." The cold person replies, "That's your interpretation," without bending. Cold people also cannot be emotionally rushed. Manipulators create urgency. Decide now. It's your last chance. If you don't act, it's too late. Cold people slow everything down. They analyze. They detach. They respond later. They refuse to move until they choose the timing. Manipulators cannot operate at slow speeds because slowness exposes intention. Cold people force manipulators to play the game of patience, a game manipulators always lose. The dark psychology, why this destroys manipulative tactics. Manipulative tactics depend on emotional chaos, urgency, and predictability. Emotional coldness eliminates all three. Cold people don't escalate. They don't react impulsively. They don't chase. They don't crave approval. They don't fear silence. Without chaos, there is no leverage. Without urgency, there is no pressure. Without predictable reactions, there is no strategy. Manipulation is a psychological equation, and coldness removes the variables. When a manipulator cannot calculate, they cannot control. Coldness becomes dominance through non-reactivity. At this point, the structure becomes clear. Emotionally reactive people get used. Emotionally available people get pulled. Emotionally predictable people get controlled. But emotionally cold people become untouchable. You've learned that cold people collapse manipulation, destabilize emotional predators, deny psychological access, create hierarchy, and control the emotional environment. Power is not about aggression. It is about emotional distance. Power is the ability to remain untouched in environments designed to provoke you. This is psychological dominance without raising your voice. There is a moment when you stop being emotionally accessible to everyone and become emotionally accountable only to yourself. A moment where manipulation stops working, not because you memorized tactics, but because your identity shifted. You stop being someone who can be guilt-tripped, rushed, or emotionally cornered. You stop being someone whose patterns are obvious. You stop being someone who carries other people's chaos. You become emotionally untouchable, steady, controlled, unreadable, and immune to disruption. This isn't numbness. It is mastery. It is self-respect. It is sovereignty. It is psychological freedom. When you reach emotional untouchability, you move differently. You speak slower. You respond later. You listen deeper. You observe more. You reveal less. You choose logic over impulse. You choose clarity over chaos. You choose silence over argument. You choose distance over drama. You choose peace over performance. Manipulators no longer see an open door. They see a wall they cannot climb. You become someone whose emotions are not accessible, exploitable, or controllable. Someone whose calm cannot be shaken. Someone whose mind cannot be rushed. Someone whose boundaries cannot be bent. This is power without noise. This is emotional sovereignty. Let's bring everything together. Your full arsenal against manipulative minds. Cold people don't react to hooks. Cold people create uncertainty. Cold people refuse reinforcement. Cold people walk away easily. Cold people stay calm under pressure. Cold people expose hidden motives. Cold people make manipulators powerless. Cold people cannot be guilt-tripped or rushed. These 8 traits make you someone manipulators avoid, someone too controlled and self-aware to be used. When you become immune to emotional bait, the world treats you differently. Boundaries stop being tested. People stop assuming access to your emotions. Manipulators sense distance and retreat. You become the stable one in every room, the unpredictable one in every conflict, the unshakable one in every negotiation, the calm one in every storm. Manipulators feel it instantly. Some avoid you, some respect you, some expose themselves, but none can control you. Emotional independence destroys psychological grip. Neutrality removes leverage. Detachment makes manipulation irrelevant. If this message showed you why manipulators lose power when you stop reacting, tap like and hit subscribe. And drop this in the comments. I choose control over reaction. Because once your emotions stop being predictable, manipulators stop being powerful. And you become someone they can no longer touch.